Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sideline Shenanigans. My name is Brian Jones. I'm your host. I have Coach Josh Miracle from Westfield High School. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me today.
Absolutely. Where did you where did you grow up, and how did football shape your early life?
Yeah, great question. I was fortunate to grow up in Hobart, Indiana, so up there in the region, as most know it around the state. Was a brickie, so growing up in Hobart, you kind of just everything you did was really football driven. They had great years down Howell, and I know, my dad played and was fortunate to go to the state games a couple times during his heyday there, and that was just kind of the expectation was, hey, we wanted to get involved in the football program. So was very blessed to have some great mentors around me, the likes of Tom Kerr, Don Rogers, uh, and then my head coach Wally McCormick during that tenure as well. So those guys really helped shape a lot of my coaching philosophy, and just saw them impact the community as a whole. So very fortunate to grow up there.
Who was your biggest mentor growing up, on or off the field?
Yeah, I think mentors have probably changed a little bit. They ebb and flow. So growing up, obviously, my mom was huge influence on me. And then, you had coaches, like I just mentioned, Don Rogers, who was very impactful along the way. Probably maybe my biggest, though, growing up in high school, I would say my grandparents, my grandpa in particular. He was the one constantly there at, practices, games, supporting me, and just being a really good influential figure in my life. When I got to college, uh, I would say that changed a little bit there. And one of the best mentors is probably, Jake Gilbert, who I was able to play for at Wabash College when I was kind of helping run the scout team for him as he was the defensive coordinator. And then ultimately, was able to jump on staff with him at Westfield and was an assistant under him for, I guess 12, 13 years. So just that mentorship of him helped me grow, not just the football coach, but also as a dad and husband and, everything in between.
What's your favorite book and movie, and why?
Yeah, I think book wise, I'm probably a big Maxwell fan, so we go through the 21 Laws, frequently within our mentor class, and that's probably the genre I stay into. I'll definitely pick up a good sports psych book, and day in and day out, going to read the Bible. I mean, that's probably the most influential, book, and where I'm going to go to more often than not. Movie wise, could probably go a lot of different ways. Like some good old comedies there, but Remember the Titans is probably one of my favorite, football movies. So I guess I'll stick with that for
Hmm.
that question.
What core values do you try to instill in your players?
Yeah, I think it starts for us as a family. We want to make sure that we uh, really buy into what we believe ourselves. My personal mission is to love, lead, grow. I want to love God and people while I grow and lead myself and others effectively. And then in our family, our household, my wife Renee and I, we're trying to teach our boys, our own system of values, which we just use our last name as a quick little acronym. So miracle. So we're gonna, make memories together, intentionally invest our time, talent, treasures. Roadmap is just us having some biblical principles. The A just stands for add and value. So we want to be present and a part of everything, and just try to make it better. When we look at C, just celebrating and cheer, just want to be each other's biggest fans in our family. L for love and respect. I feel like that's great, especially for us to model our marriage to our kids. And then E is our fancy way, just elbow grease, being a family that, works hard in all that we do. And then from that, our football program, we've had kind of our own set of core values for a long haul. When I played for Chris Creighton at Wabash, our whole deal was make playing football one of the greatest experiences of life, helping, reach our full potential. And that's what Jake's kind of used. And we wanted to follow suit and keep that trending in the right direction here. And then our 5 program goals, center around family, make a difference, commitment to excellence, fun, and then victory with honor.
What are some non-negotiables in your program?
Yeah, I think our process of how we do things is outwork, out love. So maybe it looks different from team to team and player to player, but we want to get the best out of people. So I think you have to build relationships with those people. So that's where it starts with us as a coaching staff in particular, and then being able to work everything that we do. We want to give attention to detail and just honor our commitments and make it the best version that we possibly can be. And I think if you get too rule heavy, sometimes guys get so centered on the rules as opposed to just these are the standards and maybe more expectations of how we do things that are important. So as we continue to evolve, I think we've become more and more player led as the players understand what it takes, and they're the ones who ultimately it's their team and their big investment in the program, so they get to have their say on expectations. Really, on my team, I kind of have one rule, and the rule is just does it make my family and my teammates proud or make them better, and that's about it. If you can't answer that it's going to make your family proud or teammates better, then you probably don't need to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. How do you adapt your approach based on each individual player?
I think that's kind of the fun part in coaching, right? Every player is going to be a little bit different. Every position group, what you're asking them to do, might change. Even from a coaching standpoint, we all kind of have our own maybe ways that we prefer to coach, and you're meshing those things together. So I think you got to meet players where they're at. I do think it seems like everybody points to this generation of players, or they don't do this, or they don't do that. I just think there's different challenges along the way. So being able to be flexible and meet our players where they're at, I think is important, especially when you're talking about maybe a freshman who's just getting ingrained in the program versus a senior. Maybe the expectations
Mhm.
of how they lead and what we ask them to do, hopefully, gets a little bit stronger over the course of time in our program.
How do you make sure the team doesn't overlook any opponents?
Yeah, I think the starting place is, it's a standard, right? It's not just about the people you play. I mean, we're trying to be, at our full potential. What's the best version of ourselves look like? And it's hard to do week in and week out, especially the conference that we play in. There's no off weeks. Teams are loaded week in and week out. So I think that probably helps where you just don't have the chance to overlook anybody in our conference. But I do think, that's a danger. We're coming off of a successful season, and you can't coach this team the same. It's not the same team, and you got to figure out, I think, what motivates each of us, and that's the fun part year in and year out.
How does the team respond to how does the team respond after a loss?
Yeah, I was really proud of our team last year. We had lost, in the middle of the season to Brownsburg at their place, and they had come back on a Saturday after a weather delay, and they ended up getting us by just a couple points. But that's where you always have a chance to see what your team's really made of. Sometimes winning can cover some things up, and you try to be proactive about that. But ultimately, when you lose, you figure out how strong is your culture. Can you stay committed to one another and not point fingers and just get back to work? And I think the next 5 weeks after that loss, we played some of the best football that we've played here, putting some running clocks on some teams. And I just think our guys were extremely locked in and was so proud of them. And, now we'll see again, how do we respond after, losing in the state game? That's your last game. And you obviously want to win that one, but there's valuable lessons. And, I think I was just proud of how our guys carried themselves. And I think it hopefully will feed, and hunger the next group of seniors here that are starting to lead the way.
Um, how does the team respond after a loss? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Wait.
that's kind of what we just kind of went through there. Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How do you incorporate player feedback into team planning?
Yeah, I think it should be a little bit of an ongoing conversation. I mean, you want the players to be heavily invested in the process, especially when it comes in season, when you're talking about game plans. What do they see on film, preparation, what's effective for them, what are they confident in? So I do think it's kind of an ongoing discussion and conversation. I don't get, I don't know, maybe offended if there's some questioning or dialogue going on. I feel
Mhm.
dialogue, just respectful conversation. So maybe that's as we try to make them a little bit more like adults and have them invested in the process. But yeah, we love when the players, you know,
How do you prepare your team emotionally and mentally for big games?
excellent question. I do think that um, is something to be said about the increase in just the sports psychology world and what we're placing on the mental side of the game because it is so impactful. I was fortunate they allowed me to teach a sports psychology class here for a number of years, and we've had a couple guys that we've teamed up with Ben Carnes with the mental training plan, and I think that you're looking to just build these systems and these habits in guys where they can go to them consistently. Because I think it's easy sometimes to just say, "Oh, this is just like any other game." If you haven't played in a state game, I mean, it's not like any other game. There's a lot of other distractions and things that try to seep in. What you're asked to do in the execution is very similar to every game, but sometimes, maybe the perceived pressure or things that other people try to put on your plate might be a little bit different. So we want our guys to, constantly build that, build different skills. We kind of call them tools in the toolbox that they can go to because it may look differently for each kid. One kid may really need to hype up and be extra motivated going into a game. Another, maybe needs to decrease some of that tension and calm themselves back down. So if you're trying to get them to do the exact same thing, it may have a great effect on one and worsen the effect on another. So that's where I do think going back to even how we were talking individualized coaching, I think that mental process plays into that as well.
What's your in-game decision-making style? In instinctual or analytical?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Probably ever evolving for me, just as the first year being a head coach. I think it's one thing Jake and I always, talked about, where he said, "Hey, you're never going to be fully prepared for everything because there's just a difference when you make the final say." And I kind of said this in one talk in the off season that there's a difference between suggesting and deciding. And I feel like he was always great about giving me um, just hypotheticals and giving me some, I don't know, ability to help make some decisions. So that was very helpful for me, even as I stepped into, this new role. But I think you got to
Mhm.
have both. I mean, you want to use the analytics, and there's so much stuff out there to get the data where you can make wise decisions. But you also got to know your players, the flow of the game. There are different variables that change, whether it's weather, momentum. It's hard to always quantify that. So you got to pick and choose. Some of those discussions we have going into the week. I think one thing I learned probably early on as a coordinator when I called the game from the box versus calling on the field is it's a lot easier to remove the emotion out of the game when you're up in the box. Sometimes the emotion can creep in when you're on the sidelines with everybody. So you want to have some decisions in place before you get to that emotional state.
Okay, coach, let's get into some shenanigans here. What's your go-to guilty pleasure snack after a win?
Ooh. Usually we go hang out at one of the coaches' houses. We kind of rotate that around. If there's desserts there, I mean, I'm probably hard to slow down. So I'm going to attack the brownies or whatever dessert we got there. It's probably game on.
Who on your coaching staff is more likely to prank someone?
Ooh, the prankster on the staff here. That's a good question here. I'm gonna say Hampton probably is joking around. He's been at this for a long time. If he's not joking around, then maybe we're trying to set him up for something too. Um, so it all works out.
If your coaching staff had a karaoke night, what song are you singing?
Ooh, that's a good one. Am I personally singing this? I mean, I'd probably try to instigate and make one of my assistants sing it first, but if not, I'm probably going something country, maybe some Garth Brooks, "Friends in Low Places." I'm kind of a country fan.
What's the funniest moment you've witnessed on the sideline?
That's a good one. I don't know if anything comes top of my head. I mean, maybe when I was first here, we did have a really good practice film session when we watched one of our linebackers who was just getting going here. His girlfriend did not take kindly to whatever he had done that day in class and proceeded to come out on field and break up with him. And that's where we had to have some regulations, and maybe we just can't have anybody on the field at any time. So that was a good one way back when that comes to my mind.
Do you have a hidden talent?
Ooh, hidden talent. Um, Man, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe not so much hidden talent, but I don't mind, cooking and being around and doing some things. I got some free time in the summer there to help out around the house a little bit.
Yeah. All right, coach. Who would play you in a movie about your coaching life?
Who would play me in that?
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be light years later, but my oldest son, I feel like there's a lot of similarities going on here. He's only 7, but um, we both may be hard to wrangle sometimes. So he may be the guy down the road.
Which player would make the best future coach?
We got a lot of guys right now that I feel like are doing a phenomenal job. They help out with the young kids in our program. I guess currently I'd probably say Isaac Cole. He's been a great lineman for us. He was the Colts Man of the Year, so doesn't get much better than that. And he's already proven, I guess, a pretty good coach. See, has some of these younger, like 6th, 7th grade linemen already working, doing drills with them. So I'll go with Isaac Cole.
What's your favorite concession stand item at high school games?
I mean, the Chick-fil-A sandwich is pretty good sometimes, but I maybe just pocket either some Skittles or Reese's, and I'd be happy.
Who's your biggest goofball on your roster?
And we got a pretty good team. So there's a lot of guys that I don't know. I'm trying to think if I feel like a couple of these guys probably graduated at this point, but I always liked hanging out and connecting with Lennox, Tristan, those guys. Had a lot of fun. I'll get to coach those guys again in the All-Star week, so I'll get to hang out with them one last time.
Hmm. Who's what's your favorite uh what's your favorite dad joke you've told one way too many times?
And I don't know this one I'm at a loss for. I don't know. I may have to come back to this and see if I can think of something. I
Okay.
probably need to be a little more funny. That's probably my first problem there.
If Westfield had a mascot just for coaches, what would it be and why?
Just for coaches. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're the Rock, so I guess it'd have to be something with the Rock there. Something tough there where that's probably our staff here where they just want to work and something that would represent that well, something with a hard hat on it, I guess.
Do you have a superstition you do before every game?
Um, I don't know anything specific. I'm probably a pretty routine oriented guy, so just I'd say kind of keep the same type of routines and things together where it's listening to music as you're walking to a bus on a away game or just spending some time. If we have a home game, I do like to go home real fast and maybe play a quick game of backyard football with the boys or at least see them for a little bit and come
Mm.
back and get to work.
Do you um what's a trend among players today that makes you feel old?
I mean, there's so many phrases they say that I don't have a clue what they mean. So that's why you get a whole lot of guys on staff, some young guys in particular, so you can fact check and just make sure
Skidivity.
yeah, that you're not
Riz.
saying something dumb or whatever it is.
What's the most awkward pregame speech you've ever given?
I don't know. people would think like, hey, big time pregame speech and everything. I kind of let the players do most of the talking. I'm sure there's been some stuff even early on as a coach where just said too much and needed to just shut up and get to the game. So I'm sure there's been some that players could probably tell you more than me.
Have you ever tripped or fallen in a huddle or during practice?
Oh, I'm sure countless times. Probably tripped on the I don't know, the tarp that covers the track on the way in. That's pretty par for the course for some of our guys.
Who has the best hair on the team, coach or player? Who would you pick?
It's clearly not me. So that you can rule me out here. I think there's some guys that would have got that luxury. Yeah, some guys. I mean, Coach Riddle, he's one of the older guys on staff, and still dresses for success, and he's got it going. So we'll give him that.
Um, what player has given you the best one-liner during practice?
And I don't know. I think you take bits and pieces of all these guys, and you remember probably the memories more than anything.
Mhm.
Discussing just getting to see them at different places, and those are the kind of things that you like, or you remember. Shoot, I just saw one of our former guys. Yesterday he was out there in our neighborhood playing pickleball, and immediately I'm still on him about his shorts and some of those things that he chose to wear at practice. I'm still ripping him, and it's he's been graduated for a couple of years, so I think you just remember some of those memories more than anything.
What's the most meaningful compliment you've ever received from a player?
Yeah, I mean, I think just when we have our family, talks and those type of things. I think when some of our players, I mean, they're pretty open, and just with us as coaches, like, hey, love you, and I just think speaks to our family, and I think we appreciate that gratitude, but I hope that above all else, our players feel the same thing, like we love them, we're proud of them, and I think we get some of that same sentiment back from our guys, and that's always a great feeling.
So, Coach, I gotta ask. I'm a big Purdue basketball fan. You would
Yep.
know exactly what I'm about to ask. Mr. Braden Smith.
Hmm.
Did you ever get to coach him in high school?
Unfortunately, he hung up football before that. He had played a little bit way back when. Actually, I just saw him in the weight room here. He was over working out today, but he's great. I got to have him AP Psych a little bit, just a fierce competitor. A couple of our coaches that also coach basketball, nothing but the highest praise for him, and he's representing Purdue, but also the Westfield community at a high level, and we're thankful. We love seeing guys go on to the next level. Kim, Dylan Thienemann's the world, and having a boatload of success.
I forgot Dylan Thieneman went to Westfield. I tried to get his brother Jake on. I tried, but like we can't figure out a schedule for each other. But
It's
man,
great
that's
family.
actually wild. Cause like me, I live 10 minutes from campus. So yeah.
That's
Um.
awesome.
All right, Coach. My last question is: how do you stay grounded amid the chaos of football season?
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done. Obviously, I think my faith is a big part of this. We're just being able to have a relationship with the Lord, and I think that brings you back to you're blessed that he's maybe allowed us to be a vehicle for some success, but ultimately he's using essence nothing that we're doing on our own accord. And I think my wife is an excellent supporter. It's not just my ministry, it's our ministry together. And then I think you stay grounded when you have young kids. They just they come in, they know you as dad, and it doesn't really matter if you had a good day, bad day. They're ready for you to just, hey, let's go play some football in the backyard, or start wrestling in the living room. And I think that helps you keep some things in perspective as well.
All right, Coach, I want to thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks
My
for
name
having
is
me and wish
Brian.
you best of luck.
My name is Brian. He's Coach Josh Miracle. Thank you for listening. Football is more than just a game. It's a passion. Some would say it's a way of life. And now you can wear that passion with pride. Introducing the Sideline Shenanigans merch store, a collection of premium tees, hoodies, and hats made for fans who live and breathe football. From game day to every day, our gear keeps you comfortable and looking sharp. Every piece is designed to match the energy you bring to the game, bold, effortless, and built for those who know what it means to be a true fan. Visit Sideline Shenanigans pod.printify.me today and grab your gear. It's time to wear your love for the game. Sideline Shenanigans merch, because the game never stops and neither should your passion.